Shalom, ㅅRabbi.
Shalom.
Okay,
Nice
to
to
meet
see you.
Yeah, I'm Pastor Moshe. So could you introduce yourself briefly for Korean audiences?
Yes. Angela Lee Warnick. Lee for my mother's maiden name. I was born here in Seoul, South Korea, and I grew up in Tacoma, Washington, which actually has a very small Jewish community, 300 families, but 30,000 Korean immigrants in Tacoma, Washington, the area. So I actually grew up with a lot of Korean culture around me, less Jewish culture, and I went on to become the first Korean American rabbi in North America, and first Asian American rabbi actually, and I moved to the New York area after college and have lived in that area and served as a rabbi ever since, and now I'm the senior rabbi at Central Synagogue in Manhattan.
And what inspired you to become the rabbi? So.
When we moved to the United States, my mother was very supportive. She's a Korean Buddhist. She was very supportive of our family having one religion, and also for my sister and I to be raised within the Jewish community. She respected Judaism and thought it would be good for us to have a Jewish community and faith. So I was raised in the synagogue. It was my father's synagogue for 3 generations. So I had lots of family, Jewish family. And I felt at home at synagogue. I was the kind of child who liked to go to Hebrew school. That's unusual in America, to go enjoy Hebrew school. And I also felt a real connection to Jewish music in particular and Jewish prayer. And my first trip to Israel when I was 16 years old, I was on the Bronfman Youth Fellowship. It's a special program. They select 25 students from North America for 5 weeks of a study program in Israel. And I came out of that and I said, this is the most amazing thing. I want to be a rabbi. I was 16, and my parents looked at me and said, what are you talking about? You can't do that. Not because I think, my parents always raised me that I could do anything I wanted, but they knew that because I had a Korean non-Jewish mother, and in Judaism, usually your lineage is traced through your mother, and because I was also a woman, and there are not a lot of female rabbis at the time, but for some reason, it felt like a calling in the sense that I could not imagine doing anything but being a rabbi, and I was particularly drawn to Jewish learning. I found it to be deeply meaningful, and it made me think about the most important questions of life. Why am I here? What is our purpose? What is driving the world? Where do we find awe and inspiration? And so this became my guiding purpose. And I studied religious studies in college at Yale University. And there I went and traveled to Israel 2 more times while I was in college. And all of this continued to reinforce my desire to be a rabbi.
How was it when you visited in Israel in your first time, and what did you see and what did you feel?
So my first visit to Israel was in 1989, and it was during the first Intifada. So it was a little bit tumultuous, I would say. There were areas they said you can't go there; it's not safe. So in some ways, it was an interesting time to be there. In 1989. Almost no Israelis had seen any Asians before. So when I would walk through the streets, the children would say, Yaponit, Yaponit, thinking that I was Japanese. And I was like, no, I'm not Japanese, I'm Korean. Don't mess that up. And so there was a part of me that felt very torn because I also felt the nationality of being Korean. And so I wondered if that meant that I wasn't fully Jewish. And that was one of the struggles I had.
And what was the biggest challenge you faced during the rabbinic training?
I think that there are 2 big challenges. The first is that I'm a woman in what is still traditionally a more patriarchal religion. And so while I was being ordained in a movement, the Reform movement, which is more liberal, so there had been women rabbis since the year of my birth, 1972. So that wasn't, but there was still a lot of sexism within the system. I was still among the earlier rabbis, and there was still not a lot of role models of women who were leading positions where you saw them publicly kind of really leading. So there was the traditional issues of being a woman in that society. Also, if I left the Reform movement and was in circles with Orthodox rabbis, for example, they didn't see me as a leader at all. You know, that's very different to be in that context as a woman. So there's still a lot of patriarchy in the religion. Okay, that's the first piece. The second is the challenge of having a non-Jewish Korean mother. And so looking as I do on my face, there were many people who challenged my Jewish authenticity, and they would sometimes ask in a curious way, how are you Jewish? Or sometimes they would ask in a not very nice way, more like, you can't be Jewish. You're not actually Jewish. You're not halachically Jewish. And so I found that to be obviously very challenging, but I think that what it did was it made me clarify my identity in ways that I had to do very early on, that in many ways strengthened my sense of Jewish identity. And actually, it helped me understand the feeling of what it is to feel like you're a stranger in your own community. And I think that for a long time, that made me feel apologetic, like I'm an outsider, I don't really understand. The more and more I understood about what it is to be a Jew. In Hebrew, to be an Ivri is to be someone who crosses over. You know, Abraham and Sarah, they had to leave their home to begin Judaism, Lech Lecha, right? They had to cross over. So to be a Jew is to be a boundary crosser. And once you are a boundary crosser, you become a stranger. So in some ways, at one point along the way, I realized feeling like I'm the stranger is maybe the most Jewish thing about me.